Good morning, Sawadee. How's it going? Hope everybody's doing well. In the workshop, I got the fan on, so it's just blowing air across the floor, so it keeps me a little bit cooler. It's very hot in here. I got a story to tell you about when I lived in Iceland. As you know, I was born in London, and some of you know I was born in London. And my father was in the my mother's British, and I was born in London. My father is U.S. So he was in the U.S. Navy, and he was stationed in the embassy in London. And then he got a posting to go to Iceland, and I was like 18 months old, and we moved to Iceland. I think we stayed in the UK for a while until he got over there, got settled in, and then applied for a house, but couldn't get a house on base because there wasn't enough places for everybody to stay. So in the end, he found a place off base, which was a civilian home, you know, like many European homes, like not so much UK, but like in Germany, you have people, the young ones or the older, what are they, like I think the older ones live in the basement, and then the younger ones the older ones live in the basement. The father and mother live in the middle 2 floors, and then on the 3rd floor and higher, the children live. So the family, like 3 generations in the same house. Similar, that in my experience, we had 2 houses. One was in the basement of this house. The town was Nordvik. So the capital is Keflavik, which is over on the left. Nordvik is south of that, and it was so you're talking like 1958, 57, 58, 59, 60, I guess I was there. And so upstairs there was a guy called Bjarni, my age, and his friends. And I couldn't speak a lick of Icelandic when I went there, but after a couple of years hanging out with Bjarni, first of all, they taught me all the swear words, and then complained to my parents that I was swearing. And she says, I have no idea what he's saying, so how did he learn that? And when it comes to find out that their children taught me how to do that, and I'm swearing at everybody. Funny. Anyway, we moved after a couple of years, like literally 100 meters away, along the road and up the top of the hill, the first house on the right. So if somebody's watching this from Nordvik, I looked on the map about a year ago, and it's really built up area now. There was hardly anything there. Only on the uphill. The lower part was just like a big football field, that sort of thing. Anyway, so I grew up there. I went to school on base, and I had to come out in the dark. And remember, in the winter, it was, it'd get light at 10 in the morning and get dark at 2 in the afternoon because it's so far north. And I'd be like, just a baby standing outside in the blizzard, in the dark, waiting for the bus. And you say, why wasn't your mom there? Because my mom was taking care of my sister, who was 4 years younger. So by the time I started school, she was a baby. So she was in the house, and I'm standing out there by myself in the dark with horizontal snow and freezing. So you wonder why I do the crazy things I do today, probably because of that. But went to school in a Quonset hut, came home, hung out with the local kids, went fishing, all that sort of stuff. But here's the main part of the story. Bjotny taught me, and his friends taught me Icelandic, and over a couple of years I was speaking it fluently. But the only thing I can remember now is Bila, which is car, and I'm sure if I went back, they say Icelandic is one of the hardest languages to learn in the world, because it's, it's so different. Anyway, I can't verify that, I'm just telling you what I heard. But I'm sure if I went back and hung out for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, it would probably come back kind of fast. But it's way back in the 60 years ago. It's funny when you look at that, 60 years ago. Anyway, the funny part, the story I wanted to share with you was, actually there's two parts. Okay, the first part is, you couldn't buy sweets or candy back then. There wasn't any, because from what I remember, I could be wrong, so if I upset somebody, I'm sorry. Iceland was slightly communist, leaning towards Russia, but at the same time, they had a NATO air base. That's where my father worked. I don't know if it was NATO then, because NATO was just forming, but it was the US had an air base there, and that's, my father's, he was a photographer, but his job was, he put the cameras underneath the spy planes, and that's what he did. And so that's why I was there. And we could go on base, wander around as kids, just wander around looking at everything, and nobody stopped us going anywhere. But the funny stories is, you couldn't buy sweets and stuff. You could buy like dehydrated fish or rock candy, which was like sugar hanging on a piece of string. That's all you could buy back then. And different world. But anyway, I have really fond memories of Bjotny, which is his name. So I don't know how I could contact, or if he's social media, or if he's even still alive. But he's the only one out of the friends I had that I can remember. But here's the funny story. I don't know if I should tell you this, but it's funny. Where I lived on a hill, so we lived in the second house. You go down a long hill, then across a flat, which was probably like I'm guessing 2 or 3 kilometers, and then there's another hill going up the other side. So if you it's a straight road. So to look at it, it's like a little bit faint. So maybe 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, something like that, from what I remember. But we little tiny people used to walk 3 or 4 kilometers away by ourselves at like 3 years old, something like that. Back then, nobody bothered you then. Probably today, moms and dads would freak out. But anyway, on this hill grew blueberries. And when you're on the hill, on top of the hill was the air base. So there's like a small road going up to a checkpoint, but all around the hill was tons, literally just blueberries, no trees, nothing else, just blueberries. So when they come out, we used to go up there and sit with buckets, fill the buckets up, and just sit and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat blueberries, straight off the bush. And funny thing I learned just in the last few days is, when they say like blueberries are good for the brain, if you look at the chakra points and the chakra colors, and then refer to that to a fruit, so the chakra point for the top is purple fruit, good for the brain. Hibiscus tea or rose tea color, red, good for the heart. There must be something in that. So anyway, we're eating tons of blueberries, like too much. We're there for a long time. And all of a sudden, guess what happened? I had an urge to go to the pot. I'm now 3 years old, I guess, because we were there. I had to be 3 years old about. I'm about 4 kilometers away on this hill, and I need to go to the pot. So what's a little boy do at that age? I need to go home to go to the pot. And that was really the nearest place I could have gone. There was no other homes, no shops, no nothing. Just a long dirt road. So Kevin starts walking. I get about halfway home and go, I can't walk no more because something wants to come out. And then all of a sudden there was an explosion. I won't get into all the graphics, but I was a mess. And it just kept coming, and I had to keep walking and keep coming, keep walking. By the time I got home, can you imagine this? What you would see outside the door? A 3-year-old little boy covered in not blueberries. And I often think of that as a childhood memory. I think, dude, it's so funny. But I made a video a couple of weeks ago about another story that I thought was funny, but I never posted it because I didn't like the way it came out. So I want to retell the story here. Maybe I shouldn't tell you all those details, but that's me. That's how I work. When I was in the green clothes, I was in Germany, and I told you this story that I worked with the Gurkhas. The reason I was there is because of Sandhurst. Sandhurst is a UK school for officers, like West Point in the US for officers, army officers. And so Sandhurst had an exercise so they came from UK to Germany, and I was a part of that exercise. I had to supply vehicles. So I took some vehicles about 5 hours away from where we were stationed, and met them in this wood somewhere, and they didn't need me. They just needed the drivers and the vehicles because they were going to do convoy drills with these vehicles. So Kevin was bored, and I went over and sat and looked at what the Gurkhas were doing when they're resting, and found out some of them spoke English. So I sat down with them under this tree overlooking this valley, and talking about Nepal, and they're telling me like they go home every 6 months or something like that. Once a year they're allowed to go home, and they're paid to go home or something like that. And but how long it takes to get home, they only have a couple weeks by the time they get home, because the flight from the UK to Nepal, then there's a bus, then there's a van and jeep, whatever, because most of them live way up in the hills, and you have to walk. So they get home and they can be with their families, and then they have to come all the way back. But they're telling me all about Nepal, and they sold it to me. I said one day I'm going to go to Nepal. So I went, and round peg, round hole. It was like perfect. Something about Nepal, the food, the mountains, the fresh air, the streams, the people, everything about it is just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And loved every minute of it. Told you about, I think I said this before, I went to Gulmi, went up into the mountains, and this is not supposed to be a poopy story, but the same thing happened. I must have drank some of the local water by accident, brushing my teeth or something, and got a really bad belly bug. I had to go back to Kathmandu to see a specialist, because I had to have some kind of special medicine. But it was fun. Overall, I still, maybe one day I'll go back again. If I could stay there, I'll probably go live there, because it's just so simple. The food's simple, the people are simple, life is simple, and warm in the summertime. If you live in Kathmandu in the valley, very hot. Get out into the mountains, very nice. Cold in the winter, which I'm used to that, so no problem. But anyway, back to the Gurkhas. And the story is, they had their job to do. So when they were playing enemy against the officers, and they went out and they set up ambushes, and the officers are trying to get the vehicles into where they're supposed. But there's planned ambushes. So it's just to see how they react and how they manage themselves. And so what did I do? I didn't really have a job. So there was a staff sergeant there, infantry guy, who was doing explosives. And when he said explosives, I was like, I like playing with explosives. We had det cord and blasting caps and all kinds of different stuff, so I loved it. So he said, would you help me with PE, plastic explosive? I said, sure. So we set it up. You know, he had like 2-ounce pieces of PE, putting the blasting caps in. These were electrical blasting caps, not shock ones. So run a wire back to the little generator box, and they had all these explosions lined up on the edge of the woods. So the idea was, when the helicopter came in, the officers who were acting as infantry were going to attack this make-believe jungle in the woods. They just had to, you know, go through it, and everything they did, they were being watched. So the helicopter comes in, I think it was a Wessex, bigger one. It lands, all the people, all the guys jump out, and my job was to sit on the edge of the woods and tell him when they're out the helicopter and coming up to the edge of the woods, because he was way farther back, away from the edge of the woods. So I said, so we agreed that when I dropped my hand, he knew they were getting close to the edge of the woods. So then I had to, what I thought, run back to him before he put the explosives on, because they weren't far from where I was sitting. So I dropped my hand and start running. Running. And so he already cranked it up to, there's a generator to make the electricity, and all the wires are connected that go to the electrical blasting caps inside the PE, sitting on the edge of the woods. And what does he do? Doom! Boom! You know, so 2 ounces of plastic explosive military grade is powerful. So, and Kevin's in mid-running, and just like on the A-Team, remember that program, the A-Team? When there was an explosion, I went, woo, flying in the air, just flying. And I was like, I'm thinking to myself, I don't believe you just did that. Hit the ground, got up, ran, jumped in the ditch next to him. He was in stitches, and I was swearing at him, and but laughing at the same time. It was fun. I mean, in hindsight, I have to say it was fun. Do it again? A little bit dangerous. But that was just a fun stories in the green clothes. You know what you find is you forget the bad times, or most of the time you forget the bad times and remember all the good times. And here's one last one, and I'll let you go. I try to be a little bit coy about talking about what I did, not because it's a secret, just because looking back today, I'm not that proud of being a part of that unit. It was a theater nuclear weapons, and kind of not my style today. Anyway, we had to practice firing these things, but the only place you could fire it was that the UK had was off the coast of the Outer Hebrides, which is a group of islands way up north Scotland on the left, called the Outer Hebrides. You can look at the map there, and there was one place called Benbecula where we used to go. So the rockets had to be taken out of storage, then put on vehicles, taken to the train. They had to be guarded, and then the train had to go from wherever, I don't remember now, but all the way up to Bremerhaven, northern Germany, to get on a ship. So somebody was volunteered, no, I didn't volunteer, but volunteered to guard this thing from stage 1 vehicles to the train and so on. And you had to stay on the train and every time the train stopped, you're supposed to get off. Well, we didn't. It was freezing cold and snowing, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it kept stopping at freight yards and stations and everywhere. I thought, I ain't getting out, and nobody else did. You kept an eye on the doors and looked outside the window, but it was freezing. And so eventually we get to Bremerhaven, the train goes into this compound, we can relax, went to sleep. The next morning they lifted the stuff onto the ship, and that was our job done. I don't even remember how we got back. I guess somebody collected us or we went by train. But the experience, it was like a 007 sort of Second World War, KGB, mafia kind of thing. Not mafia, KGB, you know, cloak and dagger sort of thing. So we're on this train in the middle of nowhere, dark o'clock, freezing, guarding these, not the nuclear weapon, but the engine that pushed it. The nuclear stuff was in a different place, and then what we fired into the ocean was a dummy. Same weight, same controls and everything, but no explosives. So these things could fire up to 100 miles, 160 kilometers, and you fire it into the ocean between 3 radars, and it pinpoints if you hit the target or not. And you could, if you know, often if you were really close, you'd get within 100 meters, and if you got within 100 meters, it was considered a good hit, because it was, you know, it had gyroscopes and all this sort of stuff to keep it stabilized. The technology was fun, but the payload was not so interesting. I spent a long time in my own time understanding about uranium-235 and what it is and how it's made and where it comes from, and then the medical side. And I thought, I don't want to really be a part of this. But anyway, that unit's shut down now. For as far as I'm aware, even today, the UK Army doesn't have something like that. I think it's the Air Force, Navy. I'm not sure who has it now, but that was the only unit, and it closed down. If you're still here, thanks for watching. Buckets of blessings, rivers of peace, joy, and kindness. So just remember, don't go to Iceland and sit on a hill and eat blueberries until there's an emergency. All the best, guys. Later. From the monk. See ya.